We'll go ahead and get started, Tracy.
Okay, let me just pull up my screen. And again, once more, hello, everyone. Nice to see so many familiar faces on what is the Policy Academy Cohort 2022. Again, hope your Tuesday is going well. Let me just change screens real quick. And so here we are. We are Best Start's Region 5 Policy Leadership Academy. And let me just do my full screen. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. And welcome to Module 3. As I said, if you are just joining us, we have an exciting speaker this evening. He actually just got off the floor. It sounds so exciting, of the House of Representatives of Congressional California District 25, and that is Congressman Mike Garcia. Welcome to Module 3. We're going to be talking about decision making today. Just some basic housekeeping skills, some housekeeping items. If you can check the chat and please sign in, it just lets us know that you're here and that you're participating. So we appreciate that. Stephanie, if she can put that in the chat. Also, wanted to let you know, it went out in the email last week when we sent you the video. There is also a Jamboard that has been created. The Jamboard creates some of the topics and resources that we have been providing for you for each speaker. It also, if any of the speakers give us any information, like Laura Valles and Assemblyman Tom Lackey, they both gave us their email addresses and some basic information. That's also in the Jamboard. So if you want to give that, just a little once over, and you can also share items that you have maybe come up that you thought, hey, the cohort might be interested in this. So it's just a great way to just to connect with your fellow cohort members. So that's some basic housekeeping skills. Again, if you just joined us, please check the chat so you can sign in. And today we're so excited to have Congressman Mike Garcia, because let me just change screens here so I can change to here. So a first generation American citizen, Congressman Mike Garcia was a highly decorated United States naval officer and businessman before serving in the United States House of Representatives. His superb flying performance earned him the honor of becoming one of the first FA-18 Super Hornet strike fighter pilots in the Navy. While on active duty, Congressman Garcia flew over 30 combat missions during Operation Iraqi Freedom in the skies above Baghdad, Fallujah, and Tikrit. A top graduate of Saugus High School, Congressman Garcia was nominated to attend the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis by former U.S. Representative Howard Buck McKeon. Graduating with a bachelor's degree while majoring in political science with a minor in Spanish, Congressman Garcia was in the top 3% of his class. Upon graduating from Annapolis, Garcia has also attended graduate school at Georgetown University, where he earned a master's degree in national security studies. After receiving his commission, Congressman Garcia attended flight school. On the heels of 9/11, he was deployed as an FA-18 strike fighter pilot aboard the USS Nimitz, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Throughout his career, Congressman Garcia was lauded as one of the best leaders and the most naturally talented pilots in the U.S. Navy. He participated in combat operations during the first 6 months of Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003, accruing over 1,400 hours of operational flight time over nearly 20 years of active and reserve military service to our nation. Congressman Garcia decided to separate from the Navy with an honorable discharge and focus on his family. He subsequently joined the Raytheon Company as an executive. Congressman Garcia is a native of Santa Clarita since his move to Saugus in 1983 with his mother and stepfather at the age of 7. From a young age, Congressman Garcia yearned to serve his nation, and he views his role as a representative for California's 25th district as a continuation of that lifelong desire, as well as a sense of responsibility to give back to his local community. He lives in Santa Clarita with his wife, Rebecca, and their 2 sons. Congressman Garcia currently serves on 2 House committees, the House Committee on Appropriations and the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. So it's my pleasure to welcome Congressman Garcia to our Academy cohort. Thank you so much. And if you want to give a round of applause, thank you so much. And get away.
Thank you. Give Tracy a round of applause for having to read all that and not pass out. So thank you guys for having me. Hey, first of all, can we go back to that Module 3 cover slide that you were showing, Tracy?
Absolutely. Is it this one or the one before?
Yeah, no, the one before that. Yeah.
This one?
So, well, with the guy, no, that the one with the guy on there, if we can.
Okay.
So, that guy right there is not my district director, Charles Navarro. He looks like his twin there, but Charles is actually on this call. It's very important because he's the district director. He's the guy that's really helping us out in the district. But if you look at Charles right now, as he's blushing, he actually looks like the guy on your module 3. That's
He does.
totally intentional. So thanks for doing that. And I grew my beard out just to try to look as handsome as him as well. But thank you guys for the opportunity to come speak with you all today. This is cool. This is to me, you know, I'm a big fan of things like this, because as adults, we sometimes feel like we've evolved or we can't learn new things, and we can always get better. We can always learn new things. And I'm certainly not an expert in decision making, but I'm still alive. I've you know, had the opportunity to participate in probably one of the most dangerous professions, landing you know, 45,000-pound fighter jets on an aircraft carrier at night in rough seas for 11 years, and not dying is really a product of making the right decisions at the right time. And I'm pretty conservative I'm pretty paranoid about a lot of things. You'll hear that in my reflections this evening, but paranoid people do live longer. So thanks for having me guys tonight. This is your meeting, so if you have questions or if there's anything that you'd like to know about, please don't hesitate to ask. I'll kind of give you, I put together just some PowerPoint slides to kind of piece together my thoughts and how I approach life in general. But give you an overview of the job that I have right now. I represent the 25th Congressional District. It's about to change to the 27th here very soon. The Antelope Valley, Santa Clarita Valley, and Simi Valley are part of our district. And I represent you at the federal level. So I've got a front row seat to all the drama here in Washington, D.C. Just flew here today. And as Tracy said, was given a speech on the floor, but representing this district. And I come at this job not as a Republican, even though I am a Republican. This isn't something I look at as a Democrat or Republican mindset. This is about, for me, it's about the country. And my whole life has been about serving this beautiful country, the United States, that we're blessed to be a part of. I think, you know, as maybe spotted as our history has been, we've had weaknesses, we've had cancers like slavery in the history of our country. It's still the best country in the world in the history of this planet. We're getting better on a daily basis. And you know, I think politicians try to convince us that we aren't as good as we are, but it's important to really appreciate this beautiful country we live in and take on the responsibility of making it better where we should. So that's where I come at. I ascribe to what I call the 4 C's. The 4 C's is a very simple thing. It's just a way to remind me to be principle-based in my decision-making, to make sure I'm doing what's right for the country. I believe in the Constitution. I believe in capitalism. I believe in competition, and I believe in charity. Those 4 C's, when you talk about any policy, when you talk about any issue that we're having as a society, whether it's in our district or nationwide, I truly believe we can solve all of our problems if we just remember what's in the Constitution, if we promote free market capitalism and we allow small business owners to keep their money, to make their money, to regulate them less. Same thing with workers and laborers. If we allow for more competition in industries, if we allow for more competition and actually encourage competition in all forums and even in the political forum, and then if we all sort of take on a mindset of charity, a lot of the issues that we have in the Antelope Valley with homelessness and you know, some of the families that are struggling, we're actually able to help them out quite a bit through charity, and it's not always a government role to fix all of our challenges in our local neighborhoods. Sometimes it comes down to us doing the right things with charity. So those are the 4 C's. And I can literally, if you ask me about an issue, I can talk about the Constitution, why I believe a certain way on that issue. When we talk about competition, it's very important. I think the country would be better off if more districts were like ours. Our district is is very purple, meaning it's a blend of red Republicans and blue Democrats, and I actually kind of don't like the idea of of two parties. I wish we had weaker parties and stronger people representing us. I wish we had stronger leaders doing the right thing for our country. That being said, our district is very purple to slightly blue, and I am a pretty conservative Republican. There's a lot of districts that are very blue. There's a lot of districts that are very red. And to be honest, that lack of competition, that lack of balance in the voices, whether it's diversity of thought or diversity in backgrounds, has led to very polarized conversations at the national level. And so that I think is a problem. I think all districts should be swing districts. They should all be difficult to win the hearts and minds of voters like ours is. And you get, I think, better candidates. You get better elected officials that way as well. So the 4 C's are sort of how I live my political life: God, country, family, in that order for me as well. I would literally do anything for this country. Just like Charles, my district director, Charles, is a veteran himself. He's actually a current reservist for the U.S. Navy. We would literally give our lives for this country. If I was asked to do that for the sake of my country, I would do it in a heartbeat. And that was the oath we took. So that's how I truly cherish the United States. I cherish what we've been allowed to be a part of here in this beautiful country. When I make decisions, I'm also looking, I come from a paradigm of imagine an upside down triangle, right? A lot of politicians actually, they have this sort of pyramid in their mind, and they work their way up through the ranks, and the higher they go, the fewer there are. And the president of the United States sits there at the top of this pyramid with we the people kind of on the foundational level supporting them. I actually see the world kind of upside down in that regard. I think the people are actually at the top of that pyramid with a wide base, and your public servants, whether it's the president, your member of Congress, or your state senator, state assembly, your mayor, your city council members, should be there supporting you, and they work for you. They report to you, and they truly do. You hire them, you elect them. They're accountable to you, and I don't forget that. I don't have any sort of sense of entitlement because of this position. This is a position that I'm honored to be in. This isn't a position that I grew up as a kid dreaming of being a politician. I grew up wanting to serve my country, and I've found a requirement to do that in this form. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Charles, can we go to the PowerPoint slide, or Tracy, if you guys are able to? There's one of my favorite quotes. It's over 100 years old now. Roosevelt, if you've heard this quote before, bear with me, but I think it's worth hearing again, even if you've heard it before. It's called it's a long speech that President Roosevelt gave back in 1910, but it's called The Man in the Arena. And there's little snippets here and there that people take and use. But I've clipped one paragraph from this Man in the Arena speech. And so if you guys will indulge me, I'll read this and then we'll kind of talk about it here and we can chat about it later. But the gist of it is basically saying, hey, it's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles. And keep in mind, this is in an era where they didn't have the right pronouns, right? So he's using the word man. This applies to women as well. It's not the man who points out how strong how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again, because there's no effort without error and no effort without shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows with the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph, meaning at best case scenario they win. And at worst, if they fail, they at least fail while daring to do great things. And so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And this is something I literally, I've got this plaque in my garage. I've got it in one of my offices. This is where I read this on a weekly basis, because I think it's important for all of us to remember that in this modern era, when we have social media, that it's very easy to sit on the sidelines. It's very easy to be in the stadium and throwing spears at the folks doing the hard work like yourselves. It's not easy necessarily to pick up that mantle and work and actually try to make a difference. And I think we need to value that more. And I've, when I've made decisions in my life about, do I really want to go to the Naval Academy? Do I really want to fly jets? And do I really want to, launch myself off the front end of a carrier at night? Do I want to run for Congress? I always have this quote in the back of my mind that basically says, hey, if you don't do it, you're going to live a life of regrets. And I don't want to be one of those cold and timid souls that knows neither victory nor defeat. So this is something I keep in my hip pocket. If it's useful to you, obviously, you feel free to think of this as well. But I think it's very important. As far as just other things, I'll kind of, there's this kind of stream of consciousness. I'd rather hear your questions. So these are just kind of, the next slide is just a short list of things that I live by. I've always lived by the mantra that speed is life, right? And faster is always better for the most part. There's a few exceptions. If you're making a mistake or if you're flying yourself into a mountain, you want to slow down and rethink things. But for the most part, you can gain an advantage in life. You can gain an advantage with all of your endeavors if you are willing to move faster, if you're willing to make decisions, if you're willing to have the confidence to stick behind those decisions and actually take on the challenges. I always use the metaphor. My 15-year-old's learning how to drive, so I'm always telling him, hey, when you're getting on a freeway, it's always better to accelerate rather than slow down. A car will slow down a lot faster than it will accelerate. So build up that speed and enter the freeway so that you're not the slowest dude on that freeway. You're actually going with the flow. And I think that's how life is. I think it's important to try to move as quickly as you can and it doesn't just necessarily mean speed. It's velocity. It's getting momentum going, building up, if you're a small business owner, getting your business plan put together earlier rather than later and effectively not procrastinating. I live by the mantra that, you don't start fights that you can't win. With everything that I do, if it's a cause that I want to take on, it's got to be something it's got to be a doable do, right? It's not just something that I want to do for optics. I don't take on causes that I think are just going to look good but end up not going anywhere. I want to make sure that when we take something on, that we're going to be able to finish it. And in our congressional office, there's two really good examples of where we slowed down. We thought about, hey, is this something we can really take on? And we ended up taking it on because we had a good plan and it ended up being pretty successful. The first thing that we took on was these illegal grows in the Antelope Valley. You guys are surrounded by these illegal marijuana grows and literally hundreds or thousands of illegal crops being brought up. Most of these folks are criminals running these operations. A lot of them are indentured servants who are working these fields and bad people, frankly, who are operating and making money off of our land in the Antelope Valley. So we started getting a lot of phone calls. It was one of these things where we sat down and said, hey, do we really want to take on the cartels? There's like 3 or 4 different cartels who are running these operations. These are bad guys. And, do we really want to take this on? And the short answer was, look, if we take it on with the right partners, like Sheriff Villanueva and the mayors of Lancaster and Palmdale and Catherine Barger from the county, yes, we can win this fight. And you guys have seen over the course of the last 9 months, record-breaking, national record-breaking drug busts in the Antelope Valley because of our decision to move forward. And this is one that's not, the battle's not over, but we will be victorious here. We just got to keep our pressure on them. But we knew going into that we would win, and that we just needed to have that plan and that resolve. The second major victory that we've had relative to sort of decision making and making sure that it's something that is a doable do was the evacuation of Americans and our partners out of Afghanistan. When the withdrawal in Afghanistan started going sideways when, frankly, we knew it was going to go poorly. And I'll be honest, I don't want to get too political here, but this president botched the withdrawal from Afghanistan. I don't think anyone argues that. We knew it was going to go poorly. And we sat down as a team and literally Charles and I just had a quick conversation about, hey, is this something we want to do? But we ultimately made the decision to do whatever that we could from our office to get Americans out of Afghanistan. And without the help of the State Department, without the help of the federal government, we were working with third parties and special operators on the ground. And ultimately, we were able to get out. I think we're over 115 people now, some of them Americans, most of them are Afghan partners who have either made their way back to the United States or are en route. So this was one of those things that we made sure that we slowed down a little bit, thought it through, and that it was a doable do before we decided to do it. But once we decided to do it, we knew we were on the right side, and there are literally now, over 100 people alive because of what we've done. And Charles has done a lot of this work and has really led this from his home and from our office. So those were two good examples of making sure that we don't start battles that we can't win. Or take on causes that we can't win. I mean, I'm a military guy, so a lot of these have, war terms of warfare. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a battle. It just means, a cause that we're taking on. There's a quote from Sun Tzu's book, The Art of War, that says, "Victors know they've won before the battle begins, and the losers figure it out sometime during the fight." And that's true, I think, with all things in life. We've got to know before we go into any major endeavor that we have a plan, that we're going to win. We've got to have plan B through Z, because plan A always goes sideways. And if we have that, if we're prepared, we know we can win. We know we can be successful, and everyone else figures out that they're not successful somewhere in the middle of all those conversations. So we again, it kind of ties out with the don't start battles, or don't take on issues that you can't prevail on. Fight for what's right, no exceptions. We've got a phenomenal team. I got phenomenal folks working on our staff, and if we didn't do what was right, if we didn't take on the issues that we thought were good for our country, we can cause a lot of damage. And unfortunately, there are politicians out there who frankly are not operating in the interest of the good of the country and their districts and their constituents. And we've seen that in the past locally, but we're committed to do what's right, and in the end, right is right. And if there's any gray area, we'll talk about it, but we always err on the side of right. And we talked about God, country, family. That in that order, for me, that's what it is. Some folks change that order around, but I will literally do anything for this country. We talked about that. There's a concept called the Ooda Loop. This was built by some Air Force guy, I think like 80 years ago. But it's this idea that if you can, conduct this cycle, this feedback cycle quicker than the folks around you, you would be more successful. And, there's people who, the term paralysis by analysis, they get put into a situation and they analyze everything. And in the end, they end up not doing anything because they're sitting there analyzing everything. They may get to a right answer, but it may be too late by the time they do that. And what this Ooda Loop does is it gives us something to look at that is a little more concrete, but also has an element of time to it. And we use this in the jet. We use this in naval aviation. Because you could literally, if you could get through the Ooda Loop faster than your adversary, it would mean the difference between life and death. You have a bad guy in another plane or a bad guy on the ground who's trying to kill you, and they're going through this process just like we are. And if they go through it faster than we do, they have the capacity to literally kill you. So this is it's an important concept as a naval aviator, but I think this applies to all elements of our lives. But it starts with the first O, which is observe, which is when you're put into a situation to look around as quickly as you can and kind of figure out what is going on, right? What is the current situation? What has changed? Who are the actors? And what do I want to influence? And what can possibly be something that I want to change? After you've made those observations, the next step is to orient yourself. where are you relative to your end state goal? Where are you relative to any competitors? Where are you relative to, if it's a mission that you're taking on, where are you relative to that goal line and what you would call success? Where's the destination? And after you've oriented yourself, figuring out, how am I going to get to that finish line? How am I going to be successful? Whether it's sports or military or business, if you're a real estate broker, realizing, what does my market look like? Who are my competitors? What brokers am I going to work with? Which brokers am I going to work against? That next step of deciding what you're going to do is very important. This defines the trajectory of your actions and those decisions. Those decisions take into account the information you got when you were observing, the information you got when you were looking to orient yourself. And ultimately, like I said before, speed is life. The faster you can get to that decision with good information, with good observations, with good orientation, the faster you will be successful relative to your competitors, but also relative to the overall environment. So that's, this decision piece is very important. It defines the path you're going to take. And then obviously any decision is meaningless if you don't actually take action, right? I've seen this in the political world, frankly, a lot. A lot of my, I've had a few folks call me and say, hey, I'm going to run for office, right? And they've observed the environment. They think they can win. They've oriented themselves in their respective districts. They know who all the players are. They think they've got the support of this guy, but not this gal. Here's my competitors. And then they say, hey, I'm going to launch. But then in the end, 6 weeks goes by and it's like, okay, what have you done? You haven't done anything. You haven't launched. And so you do have to act. You do have to take action and move out on your plan. And again, we go back to that first, philosophy of speed being life, meaning the faster you go, typically at least 80% of the time, the quicker you go, the better, right? And the faster you take action based on good decisions, which were anchored to good observations and orientations, the more successful you'll be as well. So that's a very important, this is probably the most important piece of this, is to take that action, to be the person in the arena who's willing to actually go out and move out. But then you can see the nature of this thing is it never ends, right? So just because you act, it doesn't mean you just say, hey, I'm done, success. You've got to look again at the environment. How did you impact the environment? Reorient yourself, make new decisions, come up with new business plans, come up with new policies, and then act again. The illegal grows, for instance, this was something that we observed. I went out and flew with the local sheriffs and saw all these illegal marijuana grows, and it's overwhelming when you see 1,000 illegal plantations in your own district, in your backyard, just stealing our water, stealing our land. There's dead bodies out there, dead bears, and it's just overwhelming. You see it, and it's like, okay, this is bad. I know it's bad. We orient ourselves, try to figure out, who agrees with us. We decided to move out, and then we conducted the action. In that case was we conducted the largest drug bust operation along with Sheriff Villanueva, over a 10-day period back in June. But it didn't end there, right? We saw, hey, we only took out about 30% of these. So we go back out, we observe again, we orient again, and we decide, okay, we're gonna cut the water off. We're gonna start arresting people for water theft. And that decision ended up creating, a lot more busts and killed a lot more grows. So that action, so you can see it's a very cyclical, nonstop process. And if you just imagine this kind of chart in anything you do, whether it's your kids going through high school, and struggling with grades, or if it's a marriage where you're just trying to be a better husband, a better wife, this OODA loop, it sounds nerdy, but I'm telling you, if you start thinking about it in these terms, that you will become a little more successful over time, in my opinion. So we'll open up for questions at the end, but I just want to get through my charts here real quick. We've talked about a lot of this stuff already, but next chart, Charles. Like we talked about this a little bit, paranoid people live longer. I'm a little anxious always. I'm always, hey, what can go wrong here? But I think paranoid people live longer. That being said, you can't be driven by fear. You've got to be driven by principles. You got to be driven to do the right thing. And like I talked about earlier, plan A, you got to have a plan A. Those are very interesting. Those are the baseline of what you're going to do. But success comes from plan B or maybe even plan Z. All right. And so that resolve to stick with it, that resolve to continue to go through that OODA loop process to get better, to reorient, to make better decisions, and then to take more successful actions is very important. Stress isn't an excuse for character lapses. You all have experienced stress. I think we're all guilty of it, right? We all, and it's usually we take it out on our, our kids or our dogs or something, someone close to us. Usually it's the people close to us who we hurt the most, unfortunately. And it's very important that when we're under stress and as we're going through that decision making and the action and orienting ourselves, that we don't compromise our integrity, that we don't compromise our honor or treat people differently or with disrespect. And I think, that's a very important, I think that's missing right now in our society. I think when people get stressed out, they treat people differently. You see it at restaurants when people treat the waiter and waitress like crap because they didn't get their order right. You see it on their airplanes now all the time because the flight attendants asked them to put a mask on. It's just, it's like, be a good person, and it doesn't matter. I'm sorry you're stressed. We're all stressed, but that doesn't mean you get to be a jerk. There's this old saying, I'd rather work smarter than work harder. But, imagine a world where you can actually work harder and work smarter. You'd be head and shoulders above your competition. So I don't think it's good enough to just say, hey, I'll work smarter. I'm not going to work harder. I think we have to work harder and work smarter. And I think when we do that, we have much better communities, and people take the time to do a little bit more and to be a little bit better. And if I had any regrets from my naval aviation career, it was that I didn't, I had natural talents for flying, and I always kind of took that for granted. I never studied I didn't study as hard as I should have. And I didn't learn about all of the systems as much as I should have. I could have been even better as a naval aviator if I just studied a little bit more and worked a little harder. I always took pride on working smarter, but I could have been even better if I just worked a little harder, spent a little more time studying, some of the technical data. So I take pride in that in this role that we work harder. We also work smarter as a staff as well. We talked about the 4 C's already. These are just kind of a rehash of that, just to remind everyone kind of what keeps me grounded: the Constitution, capitalism, competition, and charity. So with that, we'll go to the last slides here and just talk about some issues. Again, I care about the one term I use a lot is security. I don't really think that people want the government getting too involved in people's lives. I believe in smaller government, especially at the federal level. I think the states should have more authority. In California, I don't always agree with the decisions that our California politicians make. But I believe from a constitution perspective that the states' rights are typically more valued and important than the federal's rights and roles. And it literally says that in the Constitution. 10th Amendment basically says, hey, if it's not explicitly delineated in the Constitution that this is the federal government's job, then it is the state's job. Okay, so that's where I come from in terms of federal versus states power. It's called federalism. So when I look at what the federal government should be doing for us, I look at it in terms of security. I want the federal government to provide security for us at the national level. I don't want hypersonic weapons flying over my head. I don't want our borders to be open and people using our tax dollars that we work hard for. I'm a first generation American. My father immigrated from Mexico in 1959. But he came through in a process that was legal and recognized, and we've paid our taxes, we've paid our dues, and I think what you'll see even with our Hispanic families in our communities is that they don't want people cutting in front of them as well. They don't want people using their taxpayers or tax money that we pay a lot of taxes, and we don't want that going to people who are here either illegally or not paying their taxes. We want the federal government to spend our money in a responsible manner. We want them, when things like COVID come around, to to do the responsible thing and give us the resources. And we did a lot from a federal government perspective for small businesses as well as individuals during COVID. And that's one of the biggest investments we've ever made. It's about $6 trillion as a result of COVID relief. So, and then we want our federal government to maintain a strong military to make sure that we are the strongest from a technological perspective, but also from a capacity perspective. We're falling behind China in that regard. In some domains, we're falling behind even Russia. So these are the things that, and there's a whole list of things we can go through, but these are the things that I think the federal government is responsible for. This Build Back Better program, this is the top left issue. This is something that's been in the news. This is the Biden administration wants to put this program together called Build Back Better. It ends up being about $5 to $7 trillion. That's part of the problem. We can't afford it. We've been looking under all the sofa cushions here in DC, and there's not $5 to $7 trillion just sitting around. In fact, our nation has a $29 trillion debt right now, which is about $100,000 for every human being living in the United States. Man, women, children, our kids are on the hook for about $100,000. If we all cut a check for $100,000, there would be no debt at the national level. That's absurd. I mean, to think of that much money. Build Back Better, frankly, was not going to actually build back anything better. It was very undefined in terms of the scope of these projects, and it was actually going to add a couple $1 trillion to our nation's debt. So I didn't support that. I do think that we need a meaningful infrastructure bill. I think we can benefit from some better local trains in our district, better roads, better freeways. And ultimately, the best way to support the Antelope Valley is to make it so you don't have to go down below to work and bring meaningful jobs to the Antelope Valley. This is where that aerospace and defense piece that's on the bottom left comes into play. We are bringing literally billions of dollars to the Antelope Valley at Plant 42 and Edwards Air Force Base that really becomes the backbone of our economies out there. So this is a very important issue. Obviously, I know it well, being at Raytheon for 11 years and also being an operator with the Navy for over a decade as well. But I'm right into the classified programs. We have made sure that every program that is in the Antelope Valley is fully funded, and we've been very successful about that. We talked about the illegal grows already. We've been successful. We'll keep our foot on the pedal on that. As far as mandates, I'm not a fan of mandates. I believe the vaccine works. I believe the masks work at some level. But I also believe that when you mandate things like that and you take the choice away from Americans, there's a good 20% of the people who actually dig in even further and will not get the vaccine. And it's a shame that issue became such a political issue. But we do need to observe it, right? We've got to go through the OODA loop when it comes to vaccines, and we've got to recognize that things are changing, right? The new variants are now less susceptible, or the vaccine is less effective against some of these new vaccines. So we've got to be having those conversations and not just cramming things down people's throat, especially if they have religious reasons for not getting the vaccine. COVID relief, I supported. I did not support. I supported, I think, 3 out of 4 of the COVID relief packages. The last one I did not support. The reason I didn't support it goes back to the debt. It was something like $2 trillion, and they only had about 300 or 400 billion of that. So roughly a fifth of that money was actually allocated for COVID relief efforts, and it may have been as low as 10% of it. So it wasn't actually a COVID relief package. It was a political thing that was meant to appease certain groups, but not people who were affected by COVID. But I did support the other packages. I supported the $2,000 unemployment insurance checks all along. I was pushing for that hard, especially as Californians. The $400 was simply not enough. BBA stands for a balanced budget amendment. This is a novel idea. There's a few of us who have pushed this bill. I'm a co-sponsor of it, but it basically requires Congress to not spend more than it takes in, which is exactly what we all do in our households. Otherwise, we go bankrupt. But it's astounding to me that our government actually spends more money than it brings in. That's why we have $29 trillion of debt. And we've taken on this fight, and we will be successful. This will be something that takes a while, but I believe we will see a balanced budget amendment in our lifetime. SALT, state and local tax deduction. This is something as Californians, we got hit hard with, in 2017, they implemented a new tax code, which for the most part was very good. It lowered taxes across the board. It doubled our standard deductions, but the SALT cap prevented us from deducting anything above $10,000 from our state and local taxes on our federal taxes. So when you were filing with the IRS, if you own a home that is, $600,000 or above, and you had a job where you made more than, say, $75,000, you actually were not allowed to deduct all of your property taxes and income taxes on your federal returns. It's frankly unfair. It's not fair to Californians. New York is also punished. I'm one of the few Republicans. My first piece of legislation was HR 202, which repeals the SALT deduction limit entirely, just gets rid of it. And that'll also get passed. It probably won't have my name on it because I'm in the minority right now, and they don't like folks like me actually being able to pass bills, but it will be passed, and I'll be happy to give that up and have someone else's name on it if needed in order to get it done. And then taxes, just keeping taxes down. Again, this is a priority. We are way over taxed, especially in California.